Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take dense research and extract the essential knowledge you need fast. Today, we are deep diving into a crisis that we usually frame purely as a public health issue or maybe an infrastructure failure. That's water scarcity. But we're going beyond the risk of, waterborne disease to focus on something rarely discussed, the brutal physical everyday labor required simply to keep a household running when that basic infrastructure fails.
Right.
We're looking at water scarcity not just as a shortage, but as a chronic musculoskeletal injury problem.
And that framing is so critical.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Our source material for this analysis is a detailed mixed methods study. It was conducted in Limpopo Province, South Africa. And this research focused specifically on the daily grueling task of domestic water carrying and its measurable implications for the long-term health of the people doing it.
And, when we discuss global water challenges, we always acknowledge the danger of cholera or typhoid. It's the first thing we think of. But this study, it just illuminates the chronic, often ignored physical burden. It shows us that a lack of access to safe water isn't just a risk factor for infectious disease. It's more than that. It's a direct accelerator of musculoskeletal disorders and chronic pain.
So our mission today is to really uncover that specific physical strain this daily chore imposes.
Exactly. We want you to see why any effective long-term intervention has to address more than just the source of the water. It must seriously consider the entire logistics chain, the physical act of transportation itself.
That's such a fascinating pivot. You're shifting the conversation from, say, plumbing to ergonomics.
In a way, yes.
So before we get to the data, let's look at the basic conditions and who specifically is performing this invisible daily labor.
The source material is, it's unequivocal about the demographics in the study area. Water collection is overwhelmingly a gendered task.
So we're talking about women.
We're talking about women and children, primarily. It's often culturally designated as a woman's task.
Which, of course, places the highest physical demands on the most vulnerable populations within the community.
Precise.
And when we describe these physical demands, just to be clear, we are not talking about simple exercise.
No, not at all.
The study detailed this complex, repetitive series of movements. You've got constant lifting of heavy containers, sustained carrying over long distances, balancing, bending.
And often on extremely poor terrain, uneven, slippery paths.
That combination must lead to just monumental physical stress and fatigue.
It absolutely does. And that repetition is the mechanism of chronic injury.
Right.
When the body is subjected to repeated high-load stress, you create the perfect conditions for degenerative changes in the spine.
I see.
The study actually cites previous research showing that carrying heavy loads can lead directly to low back pain, serious issues in the cervical spine. That's your neck, where the load often rests.
And that's where the head loading comes in.
Exactly. And it significantly increases the risk of acute injury. I mean, this isn't a chore. It is heavy, sustained occupational labor. And it's being performed by non-professional laborers, often children.
Wait a minute. So the study is essentially framing this daily chore, something performed by a woman or child, as comparable in terms of physical risk and strain to professional industrial work.
That is the crucial insight, yes.
What does that comparison reveal about the true cost?
It reveals that we need to stop viewing this as domestic labor and start seeing it as an occupational health and safety crisis.
Wow.
The tools, the training, the environment, none of the safety measures we associate with industrial labor are present here, yet the physical demands are equivalent to what you'd find in manual handling professions. It completely redefines the problem.
That context sets the stage perfectly for the specific data measured in Limpopo. So let's quantify this labor. Let's start with how far people are walking just to get their water.
Okay, so distance is the first critical variable. The mean distance participants were carrying water was 337 meters per trip.
337 meters, and that might not sound like a marathon, but you have to remember.
It's per trip, and these trips are done multiple times a day, every single day, often over that difficult terrain we mentioned.
And the study found a direct, clear link here, didn't it?
Very clear link. Those who walked that average distance or more were significantly more likely to report spinal pain.
So it's a direct correlation. More distance equals more pain.
It is. Now let's talk weight, because this is where the numbers become truly shocking.
Okay.
The research observed three main carrying methods: head loading, carrying by hand or on the back, and then using a rolling container or a wheelbarrow.
And head loading was the most common method they saw.
By far. And for those people, the mean container weight was 19.5 kilograms.
19.5 kilos, that's nearly 43 pounds, balanced on the neck and spine.
But what's really incredible is the sheer upper limit. The maximum load they observed being carried by a person was 41 kilograms.
41. That's over 90 pounds.
Over 90 pounds. And to put that 19.5 kilogram mean load into context.
Yeah, give us some context for that.
The mean body weight of the head loaders in the study was 62.6 kilograms. That means, on average, they're carrying a load equivalent to 31% of their entire body weight.
31%. That number is it's staggering. You mentioned earlier the recommended limits for, say, children's backpacks. Can you remind us of that comparison?
Certainly. Standard ergonomic and pediatric recommendations for sustained load, like a school backpack, they typically cap the weight at 10 to 15% of body weight.
10 to 15.
To prevent long-term spinal issues. The average load in this study is literally double that accepted threshold, and the peak loads are far, far higher.
So we are talking about children and women repeatedly bearing loads that dramatically exceed what are internationally recognized safety standards for adults.
It's a monumental physical task imposed on them daily.
Yes. It really makes the wheelbarrow data, at first glance anyway, seem like an ergonomic triumph.
Right, and in some ways it is. Those using rolling containers carried significantly heavier loads. The mean container weight there was 78 kilograms. But they are shifting the burden away from direct spinal compression.
I see. So the method really dictates the type of injury you're likely to see.
Precisely. The wheelbarrow allows for far greater efficiency, a much larger volume of water per trip, by using mechanical advantage. It mitigates that intense vertical compression on the spine that you get with head loading.
But the head loading, that puts those intense repeated forces right onto the cervical spine.
Directly onto the neck, leading to those specific degenerative risks we mentioned. But what's fascinating is that the physical cost isn't just about the raw weight.
It's about how it's carried.
And the path they have to take.
Tell us more about the path, because I'm imagining these routes are anything but paved sidewalks.
They certainly aren't. And this study makes a crucial connection here. For head loaders, the container weight and the path's incline, how steep it was, were statistically correlated with both perceived exertion and pain reporting.
Meaning heavy loads carried uphill directly and measurably increase the cost of the body.
You can literally quantify the physical sacrifice exacted by poor infrastructure and geography.
So let's move from the physics and the data into the human cost. What does all this relentless daily labor translate into when we look at the chronic health issues reported by the participants? What does this all mean?
Well, the pain prevalence alone is alarming. 38% of all participants. And this includes both children and adults.
38%, so more than a third.
More than a third reported experiencing spinal pain, either in the neck or the back. That is a massive portion of the community living with chronic task-related pain.
And that link to distance is undeniable proof that this pain is occupational, not just, incidental.
It's proof. Those participants reporting pain walked a significantly longer distance, an average of 470 meters, compared to those without pain who walked a mean of 297 meters. That 173-meter difference shows that distance is a key, quantifiable risk factor for developing this pain.
But the truly devastating insight for me comes from the qualitative interviews. They reveal this deeper cultural layer of suffering.
Yes. We're looking at a system that not only imposes pain, but actually enforces silence about it.
The source material discusses this deep reluctance to report pain or seek help. Why are people keeping this physical suffering hidden?
It's complex. There are social norms tied to gender roles at play. For the men who do collect water, the study suggests they may be reluctant to seek help because it's culturally viewed as a woman's task.
So admitting difficulty would undermine their perceived social role.
Exactly. But for the women, the reason is even more fundamental. Necessity.
They just have to keep going.
They have to. They expressed reluctance to complain because if they were injured or couldn't collect water, the burden would just fall on them later. Or, and this is crucial, the water the family needs for survival, for cooking, for hygiene would simply not be collected.
They captured an anecdote from one participant that really crystallized this pressure. Someone said the pain makes it difficult to collect water, but she has to push through, saying, and I'm quoting here, "I want to collect," that's another problem, that collecting water's affecting me.
That quote just speaks volumes, doesn't it? It's about the trade-off they're forced to make between their own physical health and the immediate survival of their family.
It really does. And this raises a critical question from the study.
Yes, that because of these sociocultural factors and the sheer economic necessity of the task, the observed prevalence of pain, that 38% figure, may actually be significantly underestimated.
So the true toll is likely far higher.
It's likely much higher, just hidden by this forced endurance.
Looking at the long-term implications, this is profound. This repeated high-load carrying, it leads to chronic physical strain that absolutely guarantees degenerative changes down the line.
Exactly.
We aren't just looking at today's pain. The lack of infrastructure today is effectively programming long-term disability into the health profile of these communities for decades.
That's it. And interventions must, therefore, consider the long-term musculoskeletal health of the population as a primary objective. It can't just be a secondary concern to water quality.
That leads us seamlessly into our final section. Beyond the tap. If we agree that simply providing water isn't enough, how do we mitigate the physical risks inherent in this daily routine?
Well, the policy argument is actually very strong. The source material highlights that improved access to safe water yields high economic returns, potentially tenfold.
The economic incentive for action is massive then.
It's huge. But as we've established, simple provision of a communal tap is not enough if the distance is still high, or, crucially, if the terrain between the tap and the home is unsafe.
So the focus needs to shift toward engineering the task itself. What specific risk reduction strategies did the study propose?
They identified three main areas. First, improving the walking pathways.
Simple enough.
You'd think so. We need to avoid those slippery, rocky terrains and steep inclines. A smooth, flat pathway drastically reduces the physical energy and the strain required.
Okay, what's the second one?
Second, providing appropriate carrying equipment. We saw the benefit of those wheelbarrows. They allow for a greater load with significantly less spinal compression.
But, as you said, that only works if the pathways are safe enough to use them on.
Which brings us right back to the first point. They're all connected.
And the third strategy, it speaks directly to that occupational health framing you introduced.
It does. It's the fundamental necessity of teaching safer manual handling techniques. Much of this water is lifted and loaded onto the head, often requiring really complex maneuvers from a low height.
I see.
So instruction in safe lifting, carrying, and bending is critical to minimize acute injury, even if the load itself remains heavy.
So zooming out to the policy level, what this deep dive shows us is that addressing water insecurity is fundamentally about public health, yes, but it is equally a core occupational health and ergonomic challenge.
Absolutely. The research suggests that the amount of water carried and the physical difficulty of the path gradient are quantifiable, measurable factors. They absolutely must be engineered into any infrastructure solution.
You can't just drop a pipe and assume the job is finished.
You have to consider the body that transports the water from that pipe every single day.
What a profound and often overlooked perspective this deep dive has offered us. When we discuss global water scarcity, we absolutely cannot forget this invisible workforce, the women and children, and the massive quantifiable physical price they pay every day just to keep their families hydrated, fed, and healthy.
This knowledge shows us so clearly that a lack of infrastructure doesn't just breed acute waterborne disease, it accelerates chronic physical breakdown. It ensures long-term pain and disability, undermining the health and functional ability of communities for generations to come. This is a sustained human cost that has to be accounted for.
This study demonstrated that the weight carried by head loaders was statistically correlated with pain, and that improved water management could lead to tenfold economic returns. So here's a final thought for you to consider. If the economic case for infrastructure is so strong, how do we properly factor the invisible, ongoing cost of human pain and physical degeneration, the chronic suffering of 38% of this population, into the calculus of infrastructure investment, ensuring that the true cost of inaction is fully and honestly accounted for? That's your deep dive for today. We hope this has given you something truly valuable to think about.